Hello, welcome, and thank you everyone for joining this new edition of the Humanity at the Heart Book Club chat. Please introduce yourselves in the chat, and if you want to include your contact details so you can contact each other, please do that as well. We are recording this session and we'll post it on our YouTube channel and let you know, and we'll also post then anything that's in the chat. You might see that already in the chat there's a couple of references of more recent works from Sharda, who I'll introduce in just a minute. But first, I'll introduce myself. I'm Brendan Martin, founder and MD of the social enterprise Public World. We work internationally to support change based on enabling and supporting public service professionals to operate with the greater freedom and responsibility that they need for relational services. In 2015, we began a 10-year collaboration with Buurtzorg of the Netherlands, which led to test and learn projects in around 40 different settings in Britain and Ireland in health, social care, and social housing. I'm currently writing a book about that experience. That work also produced a rich and growing body of knowledge, which we're capturing in our learning and development programs, which we call Humanity at the Heart. And that's also the name of our online community, which has a section enabling any member, around 400 at the moment, to flag up a book they think has importance. So we thought, let's have a series of online events with authors of such books. And this is the fifth of those. And I'm delighted and very grateful to be joined online from the Netherlands by Sharda Nandram, author of, among other works, this book, Organizational Innovation by Integrating Simplification. It's a clunky title, but let me tell you, it's a really rich book. And it takes me right back to when we began our collaboration with Buurtzorg, the year 2015, when our first test and learn project at Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Foundation Trust began. And I first read this book soon after it was published in 2015. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been rereading it, and in the light of my experience over those 10 years, I've been finding further rich layers of understanding in the book for which I wasn't ready 10 years ago because I hadn't learned what I'd learned through the practical experience since then. Of course, Sharda, you've also been very busy throughout those 10 years and learning a lot, I'm sure. So let's get started with the question with which I always begin these sessions, which is what your book is about and why did you write it?
Good. First of all, thank you for having me. It's very nice to talk about my own work in such a gathering, especially if people are interested from practice to learn about it. Why did I write this book? I was very much interested in this concept of self-management, especially whatever I read before about self-management. It was just an experiment here and there. And there was not a systematic theoretical overview of how it works, when it works, what are the conditions you have to make it happen. And so when I came across Buurtzorg, then I started to understand that it can work. So why not trying to study this? So I started this study very much with an open mind, because if you don't have theoretical frameworks on unique cases, then the best way to start with it is very much open. And one of the methodologies which was appropriate for that was what we call the classic grounded theory, where you go and talk and you make observations, you talk to many type of people in the organization without a script up front. You know what you want to study. I wanted to understand, how is this organization designed in such a way that indeed they put the client at the center, and then what does it imply for all the other tasks that usually happens in an organization? I was very much curious to learn about that. So that was my main motivation to study it. And in that process, I talked to, I think, 40 plus nurses and people at different places, like also in a back office, coaches. And one of the learnings was just also by going to the teams and see how the practice works. Like, you can read a lot about self-management, but what does it mean? What is that autonomy that they are talking about? By being there, experiencing it directly, it helped me to write down this book. Since it was from a grounded theory perspective, the result was a theory. That's why integrating simplification theory is actually the result of that study. And I was interested in that organization innovation, hence this title, Organizational Innovation by Integrating Simplification.
Thank you, Sharda. And for those who don't know, I think probably everybody here does, but just to be on the safe side, Buurtzorg, which is the Dutch for neighborhood care, was founded 20 years ago this year by a small group led by a nurse, Joste Blok, and it has grown by now into an organization that is the leading provider of community health and care services in the Netherlands. As Sharda said, based on self-managed small neighborhood teams. And by now, having started with one team, it's got about 10,000 or maybe 9 to 10,000 nurses and nurse assistants in around 900 teams. But also Buurtzorg has, in that time, given birth to half a dozen similar organizations in other sectors, so that the whole Buurtzorg family now employs around 15,000 people, supported by regional coaches and by a small back office. And I mean small. The back office is composed of around 50 people. So it's interestingly has grown very much to scale without, I think it's fair to say, losing any of the fundamental characteristics and principles and vision with which it started out, which is a remarkable and I think very significant achievement. And I want to go back to what you were saying. You mentioned in what you said just before, Sharda, that Buurtzorg, it was your interest in self-management was one of the stimuli that made you take an interest and do the research and write the book and develop your theory. On the other hand, I think one of the most interesting aspects of your book is that and this is important, particularly in Britain, because many people in Britain view Buurtzorg's success primarily as a product of self-managed teams per se, seeing that as its main and most fundamental innovation. And of course, that organizational form is a crucial part of the story. But I think it's significant that your book's analysis starts not with that, but by exploring the relationships between the nurses and nurse assistants in those teams and the people they serve. You put that very much at the beginning and at the center of your analysis. And in exploring that relationship, you use the term attunement to describe how the professionals get to know their clients. And I wonder if you'd say a little bit more about that concept of attuning to the client.
Yes, thank you. Actually, that's the core part of working in self-management in the context of Buurtzorg. Although the infrastructure was organized around self-management, I ended up with 5 main clusters, and one was craftsmanship, the other one was the higher purpose of the leader, then how ICT was organized, and then we had attunement to the client and these small teams where they really appreciate the autonomy, the freedom, which I call freedom, the space to create. And attunement is very important because it's helped to connect these different dimensions. There are two things actually very important. The role of the leader, where the leader is putting a vision at the center, and everything around it, whatever things are organized, is around the client, that it is going to help the client. So the leadership purpose as a glue is very important. But under that is the attunement aspect, and the attunement to the client, attunement within the team is all about how do you listen to the other people? What are the needs I ended up saying that there are three main principles in the work of Buurtzorg. And before we started, Brandon, you asked me, is there a second edition? There's no need actually to write a second edition because the same principles are there still alive and they are still working. And that's very interesting because I call them needing principle, rethinking principle, and common sense. A needing principle is that it's not a nurse comes and says, like a nurse says, this is what I have to offer and this is my clinical baggage and I will just use it. It's really attunement what helps to understand what does the client need. So the needing aspect, what the other person needs, becomes the core instead of what you have to bring. And the other one is that rethinking, because Buurtzorg is organized in such a way that all these self-managed teams, it's not that the self-management teams have a prescribed way of working. Even within the teams, if you look at several teams, they have their own way of working because the autonomy is given. They organize the things themselves. They know what they have to do. They have, of course, the expertise. They know how to coordinate. They know themselves how the neighborhood where they are working needs them. So they know the neighborhood well. And that also requires that attunement constantly of what is here needed. But also if I have a different context, I have to rethink, is that same approach here also applicable or do I need to adjust it? Within a lifetime of a patient, a client, we don't use the word patient, client, we also see that rethinking is important because the whole, the main, you can say, approach from the nursing perspective is very much positive. So you can say positive from a very much viewpoint of what is the client still capable of instead of what the client can't do. So from that capability perspective, the nurses are always trying to help the client in a way that they can do things themselves after a while. So they are empowered instead of only being helped or supported. They are also being empowered. And for empowerment, again, you have to be very much working in that attunement space, that what is here needed? Do I need to rethink how I worked maybe a few months before? And how is the situation of the client now? How do I have to do things differently? And another aspect is that common sense, because these are nurses with a lot of expertise. And if I talk to them, they would say like, yeah, of course, we have all kinds of expertise from the schools or in organizations where we have worked. But because the freedom is given there, the autonomy, they are able to use their common sense. And common sense for me is really the wisdom, what to do, when, and how much. And that if it's the freedom is given in that sense, it also goes with responsibility. So it's not you figure it out and that's it. They know what the responsibility is, and they know what is being expected from the back office, as well what they can expect from the back office. So attunement, you can say, is happening in the team. Attunement is happening towards the back office. Attunement is happening towards the clients, and of course also the other professionals which are surrounded in this onion model which they use, saying that the client is at the center. Then we see what are the other resources or other networks of the client which are available also to support. And then only in a later, you can say layer, the professional comes in, and all other kinds of professionals like the GP or physiotherapy or whatever other medical professionals they need.
Thanks very much, Sharda. The main point of this session is to invite your questions and comments and observations, and for us to have a conversation about this. So I hope you're all getting those ready. I know that one or two of you will be. I can see that most of you have got your video on. 3 of you haven't. That's fine. No doubt you've got your reasons for that. But I won't be able to see your hand either physically raised like that or digitally raised through the reaction button unless you're on screen. So I already see one hand. And I'm going to respond to that by asking you, Mike Cribb, introduce yourself briefly, would you? And then make your point or ask your question. And welcome.
Thank you. I went to this book expecting not very much, to be honest with you, because I've read a lot of the books from this book club. But Sharda, this is an exceptionally good book. So my first comment is, it's subtle. You show very clearly how complex the systemic interweaving of factors are in an organization. And anybody that's watching this that isn't in this meeting, read this book as an introduction to not particularly Buurtzorg, but maybe as a corrective to this idea of autonomous systems. Put 5 people in a room and let them get on with it and everything will be all right. And what you show beautifully in your book, Sharda, is, you pick these things out and you've given them very precise names that mean something in this context, entrepreneurial freedom, attunement, pragmatic will, subtle craftsmanship. But as you unpack that, I think you can unpack that in almost any context. And what I think you've shown is that actually making autonomous teams work is a tremendously sophisticated undertaking. The simplicity of just take the ICT support that you show there, the simplicity of that is a tremendous amount of work. Congratulations on the book. That's what I really want to say. Congratulations on a very fine book. Anybody that hasn't read it should read it several times. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Any other questions or points that anybody else would like to raise now?
It was my privilege and my honor, really, to be able to investigate this wonderful case. I really enjoyed all the nurses, to talk to them, to see how they work, their openness, and indeed, it looks like it's very simple, but it requires courage. It requires courage from the founder to say that, this is how we are going to organize it. And we will keep doing it. So, thanks to Joost de Blok, of course, for setting this up. Yeah.
I'm going to come back to that and to Jos's qualities and also to the issue of some of the issues you've raised about, and that Mike has raised, about the nature of knowledge in a complex system, and it's important, and what we mean by knowledge and the different forms of knowledge, which there's a chapter in the book which explores this, I think, very richly indeed. But first, I see that Matthew Measy, who is one of life's super connectors, his skills in connecting people are unsurpassed. And he's helped us to promote your book, actually, Sharda. And Matthew, you're very welcome. And please, what have you got to say or ask?
Thanks, Brendan. It's kind of you to say that. And I definitely plan to read the book. I've not read it yet. There was a book where I was working at the Health Foundation. I thought I'll borrow that, and then it just disappeared, and I can't work out who's got it. So I think I'm going to have to buy my own copy. But the question I have, and I don't know whether it's probably not something you would have talked about in the book, but I'm just intrigued about whether you think the Buurtzorg model is kind of unique, or are there other sort of similar-ish models that have grown in a similar way, maybe in other sectors, in that organic, viral way, spreading team by team, or is there or is Buurtzorg almost kind of unique, and there just aren't other similar growing things, reaching thousands and thousands of, not 10,000 or whatever staff through these individual teams growing kind of virally. Is that something you've looked at all or heard on the grapevine?
I think Buurtzorg is unique because of the integrating power of all the different aspects in the system. What we have seen is that many other organizations have tried some aspects of it. And usually people think it's the self-management structure. So they are going to restructure and giving people some space in a team. But the rest of the organizational design stays in the same way, functioning with the manager and different layers. So, I mean, there are two other colleagues very much working on helping organizations change to a self-management, Ben and Astrid, who were also helping at that time in the Buurtzorg project. And what I know about their work is that they say, it's the intensity of autonomy that you are willing to give. Because there are some variations. Some people will give some autonomy. Still, there is some hierarchy. And in some cases, it might work. In some other cases, it's like you have, for some departments, this autonomy, but for others, you don't have it because you want to have it standardized. So that makes it different. And I know from my own MBA students, some of them have been applying it in their organizations, like some of the banks. And then they realized that if you bring together people with different expertise in one team, it might create some more complexity. So it's better to have the homogeneous vision and common shared, tasks ahead than if you mix up many different disciplines. So it might work better if the teams are more homogeneous in the sense of the work expectation and how they are working, what they want to achieve. So in different banks, they've tried this and they have not done it in the same way, the same intensity of autonomy. We have seen it in some different countries also, they are applying it. And of course, each country, they have their own social health systems. So it might not be applicable in the same way in different settings. But if you look at the principles, I think the principles are very important. If you give people that space for, working as a professional, that is a very basic principle. And what I'm doing is I've written a book, Rethinking the University's Role, which will be published in a few months. There I'm suggesting to universities to also use some of the core principles of Buurtzorg to think about how universities would transform in the age of AI, in the age of polarization, and a lot of things geopolitically happening, affecting also universities and the university's role. So if you ask me the question whether you think these principles are also applicable elsewhere, I think certainly they are applicable, because these are actually, you can bring them back to values. How do you deal with another person? The humanness, the dignity towards the other, respecting, listening to the other, attuning to what is really needed. These are basic values, actually, if you wish to call them values, which everywhere people would like to be treated like that, I believe. And we have tried to see if there are other self-management organizations. There are here and there some small organizations, but not in this at this scale. When you look at the number of employees, not in that sense.
Thanks, Sharda. Matthew, we can come back to you if you've got further questions or points, but maybe you will have.
That was great, and I look forward to the university book. That sounds intriguing as well.
Okay, Chris Edmund, you're very welcome. Chris is in the island of Jersey, Sharda, and is a medical doctor. Chris, very good to see you. And what's your point, please?
Thank you. Nice to see you all. I haven't read the book yet, I'm afraid, but I've just ordered a copy, so, so you've got another sale. So I work with lots of different organisations. I'm an occupational physician, so I work with a variety of companies. I've actually recently started working a little bit separately with a community nursing organisation, who I guess are trialing at the early stages self-managed teams just in one team. And I'm working with that team on a digital project. The reflection so far, however, has been that I guess in an organization that's been typically led in a typically more hierarchical manner, the team feels a bit lost and at sea and without direction. And obviously Buurtzorg set up with the model in mind from the beginnings of the organization. It is directed in one particular way and everybody shares the vision. What experience have you had and other organizations had of trying to transition and almost pilot it on a smaller scale? And is it possible, or do you need that universal unifying vision from the beginning, do you think? Because I think our experiment so far hasn't been particularly successful, but it's been on a very small scale. And actually, interestingly, it's been with a multidisciplinary team of nurses, physio, and mental health nurse. So there isn't necessarily that single vision.
Yeah. I had some sessions with consultants working on, transformation of organizations. And we had many discussions about what is the success factor of Buurtzorg. And again and again, I would bring it back to principles and, of course, also the patients. Because what I came to know when I was around with the nurses, it's not that this way of working suits everyone. You will see that for some people, in the first week, if they are doing their just onboarding process, they might feel, no, this is not the structure I can work in, because it's not structured at all from this perspective. There is a structure, but there is this willingness. There is a willingness to work in that way. But the way people are trained, it's all so conditioned with the mind that, it is your position, this is your responsibility, and that's someone else's responsibility. And from that perspective, jobs are so much cut down in tasks, which at the end of the day, people don't feel that responsibility of the whole overall process. And that makes it very difficult. What I've also heard from the people there is that it might sometimes take even 8 to 9 months to get used to the way of working in the way it is organized, because a lot of the tasks are being done by the teams. And this doesn't mean that everyone is from day one aligned. As in other teams, you might also have struggles, conflicts. But what brings them back to the core is that the vision is so clear, and the vision is simple and clear. And again, the people see that their vision is not something just on paper for them, but it is lived. The lived experiences, this is what they see in the back office, if they see how the founder is behaving. And that gives them the kind of trust that it is not just a vision on paper, it is lived, and we can also do it. So it takes some time to really understand it and to apply it and experiment with it and to really establish the way of working where there is autonomy, because sometimes people also don't need that space or that autonomy, maybe in their career. There are some young nurses who might just want to have 2 days of work and just, from this time to that time, and not bothering about the whole perspective of that organization. You might have those kinds of people as well. But if you go to the deeper motivation of those who are working there, they are not working because of some kind of promotion hierarchically, but intrinsically. The space that are given to learn more, to do more things, and that ownership that they get out of it, and that entrepreneurial freedom that they feel makes it a very interesting space to work and to you can say to learn about what are their talents, where are they good at. And in one of the recent articles, I even moved towards spirituality to say that, you know, you can see this organization as an organization creating facilities to become very much the person you are, the skills you bring. And I labeled it spiritual discernment, that, you know, you really get the space also to see what works for you, what doesn't work, and you can experiment with it. And usually we talk about organizations where spirituality is really something that they want to maybe encourage. They think of creating a meditation hall, something like that, those kinds of tools. But if you want to sustainably give that space to people to become who they are, then you have to create some infrastructure. And I believe that infrastructure which is being created helps also to have this sustainable engagement from the professionals. Once they understand what they are doing, it's that they enjoy doing it, exploring and continuously doing the work. And again, it's not that there are never conflicts, but that's life. That's how it works. That's how they connect to each other, how they relate, how they attune, how they try to, as a team, create that shared vision and make it happen. It's not you are responsible, I'm not responsible, until everyone becomes responsible. And then things happen. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Fletcher, I see your hand up, and I'm going to come to you in just a minute, but I just want to follow up on the theme that's just come up in that exchange, if I may first. I think and one of the interesting things about this book, one of the things to notice, which you could easily overlook, is its title. I said at the beginning it was a clunky title, but it's actually a really good title because it really does tell you what the book's about. And integrating simplification is crucial to the analysis that Sharda makes about the information that she's sharing based on her interviews and observation. And what's noticeable in the book is how you begin just about every chapter with a reminder about the primary purpose of Buurtzorg and how that is expressed in the primary work process of the primary process professionals, what inappropriately tends to be known as the front line in British public services, and how everything flows through the organization from that logic. Everything is set up to either serve that, and the same kinds of questions that the nurse and the nurse assistant would ask about what is needed here is what we decided to do before still working. What do we need to change? How can we change it? Those are the questions that run right through the organization in a very consistent logic. And I think that's really important. It certainly resonates with our experience in Britain, where we've worked with, as I say, around 40 different organizations, some of which have made much better progress than others. But always the challenge has been to get that integrated simplification right through the organization. So, for example, I'm working a lot at the moment with the Thistle Foundation in Scotland. We've worked with 20 or 30 of their teams. We've worked with their coaches. And now, unsurprisingly, what we're finding is the key part of the work now is helping the back office and the administration of the organization to change in a way that is attuned to the needs of the primary process workers themselves. So both positively through that experience and by default in many National Health Service organizations, we've seen that it actually breaks down and some of the basic elements of the model, the trust that you can build up, which can be very easily destroyed. If that logic of organizational simplification breaks down at any point, particularly with leadership and particularly with administration, then the whole thing can unravel quite quickly, is what we have seen. Mike, I see your hand, and I'm going to come to your hand, but I'm first of all going to go to Fletcher because
it was just part of this conversation, that was all. But
okay, no, then jump in, Mike. Jump in on that.
Okay, because I was trying to tie together where I see Sharda going with questions that Matthew asked. Because I think there's a lot more wisdom in your book as a systems specialist than the purpose. The purpose draws all the iron filings together, as it were. It's like a magnet that draws them. But the things that are drawn in the Buurtzorg system are fundamental to any system that will work. Let's just take a tiny thing that's almost a throwaway in your book at several places, because you talk about the primary purpose. So the primary purpose is achievement of client care. But actually that implies that everything else is secondary. So let's compare to Matthew's organisation. Sorry, Matthew, the NHS. You know, there are parts of the NHS that has 17 layers of management. 17 layers of people who've kind of invented jobs in order to analyse lots of data, to make things happen better. These are secondary functions that have become primary functions that stifle the whole organisation. Parts of the NHS are completely sclerotic as far as me as a system specialist goes. So I would really please anybody here and anywhere else, read the book, but don't just take, and I'm being really cheeky here, Sharda's interpretation of her own book, because she is focusing very much on the purpose. But actually, if you read the book and see the 20 or 30 other systemic truths that every other organisation has to have, those are the things that make something work. And let's just take that one thing again. Everything else is secondary. So don't have big bureaucracies. Make forms as simple as possible. These aren't incidental things. They're absolutely essential to making a system dynamic and serve its higher purpose, to serve a human being. Apologies, I will now attempt to shut up for the rest of the meeting.
No. I'm really thankful also, Brendan, whatever you said, and Mike, it's enriching indeed. The whole perspective. There is a systems thinking behind, of course. Without that, it will not work. And in many organizations, we have made the people who are highly educated as even whatever role they have in the organization as the most important. We have made hierarchies in the hierarchy most important, while we do not focus on how things are organized. So from an organization design perspective, is that systems perspective that is systemically helping to tie all the dots. That's very, very important. And then, of course, the purpose, because why I'm talking about the purpose is that where you see organizations are trying to grab into the self-management system and they are not successful, they might think of, then we have to go into the purpose. But also, if they only go in the purpose, it will not work. That's why I call integrating. Integrating is a very important part of the title. What is integrating about? Integrating the primary process with the rest, integrating the financial structure with the rest, integrating all main tasks in an organization constantly. It's integrating, and that makes it a whole systemic approach, which is very helpful for any organization, I would dare to say. Yeah.
Thank you, Sharda. Fletcher, finally, and apologies for the delay, but I wanted to pick up on that thread before we lost it. So Fletcher, over to you.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you fine.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, actually, these questions are a bit related in some ways. Yeah, some of what I wanted to ask has been answered. But first of all, I haven't read the book, but with what is being said here, I'm enthused to order it as soon as possible. Two things as you were speaking that captured my attention. The first one was the common sense. It seems you are saying frontline workers have to have a lot more space for common sense decisions, because that is part of what frees them to be innovative, to be creative, and do certain things. And within a system, of course, that would be given if the reward structure, the incentives are pointing in that common sense direction. That's the first one. I would like you to kind of re-explain it so I can understand it, whether it is guided common sense or is common sense as the word sounds. The second part is systems tend to be interlocking in many ways. So you can look at an organization, but it exists within a certain policy, government policy or structure. I've been wrestling with whether Netherlands has, say, for instance, a form of decentralization that is conducive to this. If you take it to another country, maybe that is not there. People thrive in some top-down way of working, and so the issue is how do you really promote this bottom-up, very genuine and very good way of doing things in a constrained environment where the organization can grow, but then the broader environment could be constraining in terms of government policy and the way the bureaucracy works. I wondered if you could comment on those two.
Yeah, thank you. Common sense is not just like common sense, individual, and everyone tries it out. In that sense, it's always, of course, in the context of a team. So if people feel like there is some other way of working, much better for this problem to solve it, they have, of course, team members to discuss. It's not that every unique person comes with some common sense and says, this is how we work. So there's always this kind of back and forth, checking, sharing, and getting this insight, whether it would work or not. So that's the space within the team. But of course, if people are in the individual context helping and they feel like this is a better thing to do, what helps them is that they constantly think of how does it help the intention? And if it helps the intention, then it becomes a common sense space that they are using. So common sense is then brought into an aspect of wisdom. And in the context of a team, it's that shared sensing that what is better to do here, okay, in that context. Of course, different countries, they have their own systems, and therefore this Buurtzorg approach, I would say that there are so many different layers, and for some it might work to go into the purpose, for some it might work to go in the self-management, for some it might work to say, like, let's have it as a very systemic change project. So there are different layers, dependent on how much it is embedded in that country, the healthcare, how much space there is. I can't say that all the other organizations where they have tried it out, they are all success stories here. So there is still, it's not that the context allows it and it will work. There's so many aspects to look into. So it helps to look at how it is dealt with the people, the systems, the context. All these three big layers still are important to see how they are helping each other. And there are some examples where some parts work and some other examples where other parts work. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharda. Thank you very much. We've got two questions in the chat, which if you look in the chat, you'll see for yourself, but I'll read them out.
Allowed to share a slide, or would it be difficult?
No, we can enable you to share a slide. That just takes a couple of alterations here. First of all, I've got to make you the co-host, which I've done, and now it should be possible for you to share that slide if you want to.
Okay. I'm going to share this
Can you see how
slide.
to do it? There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is because, of course, the book was written in 2015, and I have worked more and more fine-tuning and understanding it better. So since I had needing, rethinking, common sensing, I added 3 more principles: serving, attuning, and trusting. Because what I say here, and this is my most recent publication, working further on Buurtzorg and applying it in a model, saying that, you know, if you start with that serving principle, which Brandon was referring to, you know, putting the primary system as the front, the real intention of the organization as the main thing to organize, serving principle. And then I worked with 2 concepts: meaningful and meaningless. And there I say, like, if activities are meaningless, then it will just stop. At Buurtzorg, it is organized in such a way you always have to think of how is it working, or helping, contributing to the vision. If it's not, then we don't require it. So if it's helping, if the meaningful activity is there and it's helping, then you see that there will be also the willingness to attune. The attunement principle becomes more important. And with attunement, there might be some activities which you can say these are more mindless activities, and there are activities which are more mindful. Being with the client is more mindful activity, because the core of care is taking care, supporting, helping, empowering the person in front of you. And a mindless activity can be the activities which are like the task that needs to be done, and the scheduling, the organizational aspects in every team. So you can say for that, you might need some systems, and in that organizational process, you have to again look at what do we really need here, and where do we need technology, where do we need our rationality, where do we need procedures, where we bring in bureaucracy. Because I say here, it's not bureaucracy is per se a bad thing, because for some aspects you might need it. With the technological opportunities we have around these days, you also can give a lot of space to that technological advancement under the header of mindless. Mindless is not something bad, it's part of what needs to be done in the organization. But mindless is an activity for which you can have technology, or which can be done by technology much more accurate than a human being. So you create space for the mindful activities, where really the love for craftsmanship becomes more important. And there you bring in space for the common sense, along with the rethinking, because rethinking becomes also, again, important in that space of technology. And then you link it all back to the higher purpose. Just wanted to share this model because I think it helped me a lot, and maybe it took me 10 years also to really understand if I want to bring it back to a more of a systemic model which can be applied in any organization. That this might be something that is filled with the principles which any organization can relate to.
Thank you very much. That's wonderful, Sharda, to share your more recent
Let's stop
development of your thinking with us. Yeah,
okay,
you can stop the share now. Yes, please. If you go down to share, that's it. Lovely. Thanks. And I see that the points about the spiritual aspects that Matthew and Mark have put into the chat has sparked quite an interesting little conversation there about the spiritual aspect. But I wonder if you would say something about that as you see it, Sharda, because I think not least it isn't insignificant that your own background draws on both your growing up in the Netherlands and also your Indian background, and I think that's quite significant in the way you understand what you're observing. But by all means, tell me if you think I've got that wrong. But I reading the book and knowing you for a few years, I sense that is very important.
As researchers, we bring, of course, ourselves, especially with qualitative research. And I think with my psychology background, economics background, later on, I moved towards spirituality, all helped me to look at organizations in a more systemic way and to understand it. When I talk, because I'm professor also in business and spirituality, and when I talk about spirituality, it's not narrowing it down to religious beliefs. For me, spirituality is a quality that we can work on, every person, a quality to connect. Connect what? Connecting between what we perceive and what we don't immediately perceive, but to which we can relate to. So in my thinking, knowledge becomes very important. So Brendan was referring to one of the chapters, chapter 9, where I'm bringing in knowledge and implicit knowledge. It's a very important aspect to understand other people if you work in teams, where I say that you can build an organization around the rational logic, but there is a lot more. If you deal with people, you deal with different ways of knowing. We ourselves in our own lives, falling in love, was it a rational thing? Things happen, right? So it is not only that we systematically determine our path, our behavior. There are things that happen, things that we do, and things that we can nourish. So in my thinking, when spirituality becomes important, that happens when we move from that rational logic towards allowing other ways of knowing. Allowing other ways of knowing means that we also at times say we don't know. And that's something that we don't dare to say, we don't know an answer. While life is full of uncertainties, especially in these days. We talk about the VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguity is there. So we think we organize in a way that we think it's all predictive, determined, but it's not. Life is not determined. A lot is there which we can't determine. Because of course, the moment we build a system, I understand we need to go and make some coherent system where we try to bring that deterministic viewpoint, but that's not enough. And at Buurtzorg, if we allow that people use their common sense, if we allow that space for autonomy, to learn from their mistakes and to build again and share with other people in the team, that creates that space for being in spirituality, bringing that connection between the known and the unknown realms of life. And that's what I see a lot happening, that spiritual discernment, when to do what, how much. It's not that there is a protocol and we have to follow the protocol. Protocol is there, of course, but there is also space for being just a human being. The way we are at home, the intuitions that we use for taking decisions on, of course, it's not replacing rationality I'm talking about. It's in addition. If we buy a house, it's not only if it's rational. Unless we feel it's a good thing to do, we will not do it. So same thing happens. If we work in organizations, there are so many things that we encounter daily. It's not, you can't bring it back to an Excel sheet and rational analysis. There's so much more. And I think in many Western theoretical frameworks, we have forgotten to give that space to that unknown. And diving into spirituality, and especially very much from the Indian knowledge systems, I must say, I feel very much enriched the moment I say knowledge. There is a space of knowledge we know. There's a space which we can embrace. And there's a lot more we don't know whether we will embrace it, we will know it. But that gives that space of that curiosity to learn and to develop and to nourish. and to strive for a better future every day. That maybe I'm not ready yet to understand this. Maybe tomorrow I will understand it. Maybe there is more space. It creates a whole continuum of hope, actually, by bringing knowledge in that, continuum of from knowing towards the unknown. And that's how I embrace spirituality. And I think organizations like Buurtzorg, they never use the word spirituality, but it is there. I sense it, I know it, and it is there, the way the people work. So
I think that's an absolutely beautiful way to end this session, Sharda. It's been fabulous. Thank you. There's some really lovely stuff also in the chat. We're not going to have time to look at it, but we're going to send it all out. I hope we can send that slide that you showed us to Sharda, if that's okay, plus the links that you shared. I got the impression that anybody who's not read the book already is going to read it now, and I really do recommend it. In my opinion, it is remains by far the best book about the Buurtzorg experience in the Netherlands that has been written. But also, as Mike says, it is about so much more than about Buurtzorg itself. So I can't thank you enough, Sharda. It's also been absolutely lovely to catch up with you again after a few years. Thanks to everybody else for joining us too. We'll put all this, we'll let you know, we'll drop you a note to let you know when it's all available on our YouTube channel. And we'll also let you know in due course about the next of these. But for now, we like to finish on time. So we'll say bye-bye to you all. And again, thanks to you all for coming. And thank you, especially Sharda.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. Bye.